as well. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage from McKinsey & Company, Mr. Eric Hazan.
Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here. Let's discuss about the economic potential of generative AI and AI. Also summarizing some of the research that we did with the McKinsey Global Institute, which is our economic think tank in the past 2 years, if you bear us. I hope the clicker will work. It is somehow working, yeah. Okay, so first, a few things. If you read some of the report that we published like 18 to 24 months ago, we know that if we deploy generative AI and AI at scale, we could add to the global GDP approximately the GDP of the UK every year. So there's a lot of money and a lot of growth to go after. So that's a first point. Then there are, of course, a lot of questions on the speed of adoption, the speed of development, and also about the impact on the future of work. A lot of fears also around that. And of course, if you take AI and generative AI, if you try to do what we did with our models, like you do a bottom-up exercise, you take 800 jobs, 2,000 tasks, 25 skills. That's pretty much what you have in a developed economy. If you take that, and if you try to understand, task per task, what will be automated if AI and GenAI are fully deployed, technically, 70% of the jobs of a developed economy could be automated more than 50%. So that's, of course, theoretical and only in lab. But that's also something that makes us think, what will be a bit the future of our organizations. But the reality is that it's too simple. There is a lot of viscosity in the economy, and the speed of deployment is obviously much slower than what we had expected up to now. And it will take time before we get to this level. And while we get to this level, in fact, we are going to be augmented by AI and GenAI. So we have time to prepare ourselves to be augmented the same way we were augmented by computers or by calculators and so on in the past. So maybe a few additional numbers on this, if you bear me. And then we'll get to Europe. So here you can see that whatever we think about work, there is a shortage in terms of labor, both in Europe and the US. You see, both on the left and on the right, technically the light blue kind of line is the unfilled position since 2012. And the dark blue line, which is the below line, is the number of unemployed individuals. So in fact, and that's quite surprising for me who started basically my career when unemployment was very high, there is actually a labor shortage in developed countries, so namely if we zoom on Europe and the US. So that's the first thing. So when we think productivity, when we think augmentation of work, we are in a tight labor market. And there are several reasons, you can read them on the slide, but retirement, aging of the labor population is of course part of the equation. When we look at something which is called productivity growth basically is the enabler of productivity and ultimately the enabler of economic growth. And when you look at this, you see precisely that's again Europe and US. You see that there is a slight decline for a long while, but that US, which is the light blue line, US has been recovering in multiple instances thanks to deployment of technology, and it's actually just now, if you look at the extreme right of the slide, it's actually picking up, while Europe is actually I would say, continuously declining. So the battle we have in front of us, if we want to get to the steep part of the S-curve of technology and the AI in particular, is actually to deploy technology and not to fear the deployment technology. If we want economic growth, if we don't want it, we can avoid deploying technology. So that's a few elements of context. If we look at the median scenario, so as we are consultant, we did like very classically a low scenario, a medium one, and a very high scenario in terms of deployment of automation technology, AI and Gen AI. Actually, in the medium scenarios that we are using, we could be around 30% of the hours worked, okay, not the jobs, the hours worked, so it could be pieces of jobs, that could be automated by 2030. Actually, this scenario is quite realistic for the US, we'll get to that. It's a bit, I would say, difficult to get there for Europe in the current situation, and we'll get to that. You see, the reason why it's maybe a question is that for US, the number of occupational transition that this scenario, the median scenario, embeds is actually the normal, more or less the normal pace of basically renewal of the labor market. For Europe, it is a bit of a stretch because it's close to be twice the normal pace of renewal of the labor market. For very good reasons. I mean, we live in a much better environment in terms of social protection, but it's also a bit more difficult when technology disrupts the labor market and the organization. So there is a choice again for Europe here. Do we want to accelerate or not? And of course, do we want to reap the benefits of economic growth that are related? Nevertheless, what you should have in mind is that during COVID, we did it. Actually, we doubled the pace of disruption of the labor market relatively quickly and optimize our organizations. So it's not out of reach. So here you see demands of skills, okay? Skills that will be in growing demand that you see on the right part of the slide are, without surprise, technological skills, social and emotional skills, a bit more surprising, but because we need to accompany the transition and the disruption, and higher cognitive skills. Skills that will be a bit less in demand will be physical and manual and basic cognitive skills, which means that we need to adapt the training system, the education system to this new demand of skills that will be more and more prevalent in the next years. For now, we are a training system and an education system which is adapted to the current demand of skills, which not exactly what will be in demand in the next years. If we continue and if we adapt, so if we adapt our organization, if we adapt our labor force, if we train people, if we reskill people, there will be more demand for better and better paid jobs. So we will have more sophisticated jobs with better wages. So that's quite encouraging, but you understand that the transition between now and this actually point of arrival is a transition. So again, if we reskill people, if we adapt ourselves, it will be to reap a lot of benefits in terms of economic growth. If we don't, we will not reap the benefits, and it will be more difficult in terms of transition. So you see we have a choice. So you see 4 scenarios of productivity growth in Europe and beyond. So one axis, basically the y-axis, is actually between late adoption and fast adoption. And you see that if we decide to have a late adoption of technology, technically, we will not reap the benefits in terms of productivity growth, and we will not grow, or we will grow very slow. If we do have a fast adoption, we will have a higher productivity growth and a better economic growth ultimately. Then there is a choice, which is technically, do we want to redeploy the hours that are being automated, reskill people, reorganize our way of producing goods? Or do we want to avoid redeploying technically these hours and potentially focus only on the bottom line? So we have more productivity growth. So that's the scenario which is on the top right hand. We have more productivity growth if we do redeploy hours, if we do reskill people, and if we adopt fast. So again, the scenario to reap the benefits of this technology is not to prevent ourselves from deploying the technology. It's actually to go fast while reskilling people to give them hope and a future. So that's pretty much the way for Europe. And we have some concerns because Europe, and you've read the recent report about it, but it is well known that Europe is investing twice as less in R&D and technology than, for example, US and other regions of the world. So it's about going fast into technology investment to ensure that there is productivity growth, productivity, and economic growth. Technically, and probably it's a reverse slide, but we have to work on adoption of technology within companies and on creation of technology. So we need to be everywhere on the steps of the value chain of AI and probably doing some partnerships when we are not the leaders, but also retaining the tech leadership on certain elements and also pushing for adoption beyond the tech industry, so beyond the tech players within the corporates, which are actually not adopting fast enough technology, at least in Europe. So, in short, a few elements that you may want to retain. We need to upskill our workforce. We need to attract and retain AI talent, as a lot are crossing the borders to basically bring their added value to other regions of the world. We need to fully embrace the technology and AI via end-to-end transformation within corporates. We need to increase investment. We probably need to leapfrog in semiconductors, and we're trying to do that. And we need to increase local computing power, data centers, and resources. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Eric.